Some stories are too powerful to fade. They stay with us, even after decades. This is one of those stories. In the heart of Tokyo, at a busy train station filled with rushing footsteps and the hum of trains, a single dog sat quietly. Every morning, he took his place near the platform. Every evening, he waited for a familiar face to appear. Day after day. Year after year. This is the true story of Hachiko, a dog whose loyalty touched the hearts of millions. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Hachiko's name became a symbol of love, devotion, and the unbreakable bond between a dog and his owner. Tokyo in the 1920s was a city full of quiet streets and simple lives. There were no tall buildings back then, no flashing lights, no noise of heavy traffic. Life moved at a slower pace, where people valued small moments, a cup of tea in the morning, a walk to the train station, and the comfort of knowing your neighbors by name. Among those living this peaceful life was a man named Hachiko Ueno. He was a professor at Tokyo Imperial University, a man of habit and quiet routines. Every morning, he would leave his small, neat house, walk to Shibuya Station, and take the train to his work. Every evening, at the same time, he returned, a life as steady as the ticking of a clock. One day, everything changed. On a visit to a nearby farm, the professor saw a small Akita puppy. The little pup was just a few weeks old, with soft fur and curious eyes that followed every movement around him. There was something special about this puppy, a gentle calmness, a quiet loyalty in his gaze. Without a second thought, the professor decided to bring him home. At first, the tiny puppy felt lost in the new house. Everything smelled unfamiliar, and every sound made his ears twitch. But the professor's kind voice and gentle hands made him feel safe. Slowly, the puppy started following him around, from the garden to the front door, and even to the train station gate. The bond between them grew quickly. The professor gave him a name, Hachiko. From that day forward, Hachiko was no longer just a puppy. He was a companion, a friend, and soon, the most loyal part of the professor's life. Every morning, just as the first light touched the sky, the professor would get ready for work. And every morning, Hachiko would be right there beside him, his tail wagging softly, his eyes full of excitement for their little walk together. Step by step, they made their way down the familiar streets toward Shibuya Station. Sometimes, Hachiko would pause to sniff a flower or chase a falling leaf, but no matter what, he always kept pace with the professor. At the station gate, the professor would kneel down, pat Hachiko's head, and whisper a few words only Hachiko could understand. It was their own quiet goodbye. Then the professor would step onto the platform, and Hachiko would sit by the gate, watching until the train disappeared from view. But Hachiko didn't just go home after that. Somehow, he knew this wasn't the end of their day. In the evening, long before the train arrived, Hachiko would return to the station. He would sit in the same spot, ears alert, eyes fixed on the tracks. And when the sound of the train filled the air, his tail would start to wag, faster and faster, until at last the professor stepped off the train. This was their ritual, simple, quiet, and beautiful. No matter how ordinary the day was, these moments felt special. The world could change around them, but this small piece of time belonged only to them. It was a day just like any other. The sun rose, the streets slowly filled with life, and the professor got ready for work. Hachiko walked beside him, the same way he always did. They reached the station, shared their quiet goodbye, and the professor stepped onto the train. Hachiko stayed at the gate for a while, watching until the train was gone. Then, just like every other day, he made his way back home, waiting for the evening reunion. But at the university, something went wrong. In the middle of his lecture, the professor suddenly collapsed. His heart gave out, and before anyone could help, he was gone. Back at the station, Hachiko returned at his usual time. He sat at his usual spot, ears sharp, eyes scanning every face that stepped off the train. But the professor wasn't there. The next train came. Then the next. Daylight faded into night, but Hachiko didn't move. His tail didn't wag. His eyes never left the platform. But Hachiko didn't know. His best friend was never coming back. The next morning, just like always, Hachiko walked to the station. His steps were steady, his eyes full of quiet hope. The trains came and went, and every time the doors slid open, Hachiko's tail would lift, just for a moment. But the professor was nowhere to be seen. Still, Hachiko didn't leave. He sat at his usual spot, ears perked, watching every face. When night fell, he went back home. But the next day he returned. And the day after that. The seasons started to change. Leaves turned gold, then fell to the ground. Winter winds brought snow, covering the station platform in a soft, white blanket. But no matter how cold it got, Hachiko was there, waiting. People who passed through the station every day began to notice him. They saw his small, patient figure sitting near the gate, eyes always searching. Some offered him food, gently placing it beside him. Hachiko would eat a little, but his gaze always drifted back to the arriving trains. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Still, Hachiko waited. It was no longer just a habit, it became a part of who he was. Rain soaked his fur. The sun warmed his back. The snow froze his paws. But none of it mattered. Because for Hachiko, the world only had one face worth seeing, and until he saw it again, he would not give up. As the years passed, Hachiko's story started to spread. People who saw him every day began talking about the loyal dog who never missed a day at the station. His quiet weight touched their hearts, and soon, local newspapers wrote about him. Reporters came to Shibuya Station to see the dog with their own eyes. They took pictures, asked questions, and tried to understand why Hachiko still waited, even after so many years. His story traveled beyond Tokyo. People from nearby towns, and even from other countries, came to see Hachiko. Some brought treats, others simply stood silently, watching the dog who had become a symbol of something rare, a kind of loyalty that didn't break, no matter how much time passed. But fame never changed Hachiko. The crowd grew around him, but he stayed the same. Quiet. Waiting. Hoping. All he wanted was to see his best friend's face again. And that hope was all he ever needed. Nearly 10 years passed since the day Hachiko first sat at the station gate, waiting for the professor. In those years, the world around him changed. Children who once patted his head grew up. New buildings appeared. Faces came and went. But Hachiko stayed, growing older with each season. His fur lost its shine, his steps became slower, and his eyes, once bright with hope, carried a quiet tiredness. Still, every day, he made his way to the same spot, waiting for the train, searching for the only face he truly knew. On March 8, 1935, a cold morning covered Shibuya in mist. As the station slowly came to life, someone noticed Hachiko lying near his usual place. His body was still, his breathing silent. After almost a decade of waiting, Hachiko's journey had quietly come to an end. The news spread quickly, and Shibuya Station fell into mourning. People left flowers where Hachiko used to sit. Some brought letters, others stood with tears in their eyes. For the people of Tokyo, it felt like losing a family member, a friend who had stayed loyal until his very last breath. Even in death, Hachiko's presence filled the station, reminding everyone that some love never fades, and some promises never break. Not long after Hachiko's passing, the people of Tokyo decided to honor him in a way that would last forever. At Shibuya Station, right where he used to sit, they built a bronze statue of Hachiko. The statue showed him the way everyone remembered, sitting patiently, watching the trains, waiting for the man he loved the most. Even today, people from all over the world visit that statue. Some come to take pictures, others leave flowers, and many simply stand there in silence, thinking about the loyal dog whose love never gave up. Hachiko's story didn't just stay in Tokyo. It traveled far beyond Japan, inspiring books, movies, and documentaries in different languages. His name became more than just the name of a dog, it became a symbol of loyalty, of love that refuses to fade, and of bonds that time could never break. In a world that moves too fast, Hachiko's story reminds us to pause, to remember, and to believe in the kind of love that waits forever. In a world where everything feels temporary, where people come and go, and promises are often forgotten, Hachiko's story stands as a quiet reminder of what true loyalty looks like. Hachiko didn't understand words like forever. He didn't need to. All he knew was love, simple, honest love that never asked for anything in return. If you've ever loved a dog, or if a dog has ever loved you, then you already know what Hachiko felt. That deep connection, the kind that doesn't need words, the kind that stays in your heart even when time tries to erase it. If this story touched your heart, share your own dog's story in the comments below. Whether it's a memory from years ago or a moment you still live every day, your story matters, just like Hachiko's. Because some bonds are forever. Even when life tries to break them, even when the world moves on, some love never lets go. And if you want to hear more heart-touching stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told, stories of love, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds we share with our animals.